Welcome back, Master Gardener Trainee. This is part 2 of vegetable gardening. Vegetable plant garden planning is really quite important. First of all, you got to figure out what vegetables do you like. I hate cucumbers and most things in the family, so they need not apply to my vegetable garden. But you may have different tastes than I do. Do you have the right tools? Again, tools like a rototiller make digging up the soil a lot easier, but doesn't need heavy equipment, maybe even rent it just for a time or two just to get going and then use a digging fork. But you probably will need to invest in a few tools, cultivating hose, rakes, a shovel, a trowel, a few other things. Labor. Here's where a lot of people make huge mistakes, I think, in vegetable garden. They think you plant it and then you turn your back on it, maybe water it once in a while, throw a handful of fertilizer if you remember to, and then think you just go and pick everything in great abundance. Well, if that's going to be your style, you'll probably be very disappointed by the yield. Money. Will you save money? You might, but you might not. But you get to pick the vegetables at the peak of their freshness and ripeness. Nothing beats a tomato that you pick yourself versus one from the grocery store. Time. Vegetable gardening takes time. Weeding, watering, fertilizing, mulching, etc., etc. Even just starting your own transplants and seeds. What will you do with that surplus? It's not like Publix where you can go in and get 1 or 2 tomatoes a week or 3 or 4 tomatoes a week and, 3 or 4 bags of leaf lettuce and whatever not and a bunch of broccoli. It is all or nothing. You wait and wait and wait, and all of a sudden everything comes in great quantity. If you've ever grown sweet corn, you pretty know much of experience this, and you've eaten corn for breakfast and lunch and dinner because it doesn't last very long once it's picked. It starts getting starchy and loses its sweetness very quickly. So as a result, you end up eating a lot of things. It's feast and famine. So be prepared with either freezing it, which takes time. I remember helping my mom with preparation of freezing things, peeling it if it needed to, blanching it in hot water, getting ice cubes out of ice cube containers, the ones that were made out of metal, and the lever that you pulled up and you got stuck to it when the metal was wet. Anyone remember those days? Oh no, we couldn't buy ice out of a bag. We had to make it, and we used every kind of ice cube tray we had, including those old-fashioned metal ones. And of course, you can can them. Again, make sure if you're canning, you know what you're doing. You don't want to get yourself sick. Other people get very creative with their surplus, and some people become zucchini philanthropists and start giving away to all their neighbors and friends, at which point the neighbors and friends get a little sick and tired of all the zucchini and various vegetables similar to that like to produce in great abundance all at once. Let me give you a funny story about my mother and her zucchini philanthropist days. I was a young college student away, and I came home for a weekend. I don't remember exactly when in the school year, but it was after the fall harvest was done, and Mom had been doing her thing for weeks and months, and I was home and we were having dinner, and at one point she served applesauce. Probably had pork chops that night as a guess. And she said, "How's the applesauce?" I said, "Yeah, it's really pretty good." And she said, "Oh, so you like it?" I said, "Yeah, it's good. What do you think about it?" I'm like, "What?" I said, "What's okay, Mom? What's the deal with this applesauce? Why are you asking me so many questions?" And she said to me, "It's not applesauce." And here I have a spoonful up by my face, and I'm looking at it, and it looks like applesauce, and it tasted like applesauce, and it kind of smelled like applesauce. I said, "What is it?" She said, "Zucchini." My mother got the idea from a recipe for a cake, I think, that had a mock applesauce topping made out of zucchini. And so she just took that idea, made a triple, quadruple, whatever size batch of it, and made the zucchini sauce, canned it properly, and had it stored away for the winter. I would have been none the wiser had she not told me. So get creative with those excess vegetables when you have them. I don't have the recipe handy to trade, unfortunately, but now you can www, and I'm sure it's somewhere on the internet. Garden design. You can start with the Florida Gardening Guide. You can get that through our EDIS system, edis.ifas.ufl.edu, and that's the fact sheet number. Or if you are a little lazy, like I can be at times, you just put in Florida Vegetable Gardening Guide and then put UF for University of Florida in the query string, and it pops it up probably quicker than typing all those dots and dashes. You probably want to start your plan on paper. See if you have enough space for everything. And you want to probably maximize your space, especially if you're in a small yard. There are various ways you can maximize it. You can have wide rows if you wish. Again, you have less area that you're stepping on and using as aisleway this way. Trellising is a great way of growing those vining vegetables like cucumbers, squashes, and things like that. Pole beans, peas, etc. You want to put it on the north side of the vegetable garden so you don't shade the other vegetables by the tall structure and the foliage of these rambling vegetables. And here are some kind of cucurbitaceae family member, probably up their little cucumber right there on the left hand side of the picture, about a little past halfway up, and you can see the little yellow flowers here and there. Now again, if you kind of quickly glance at that, you may have overlooked the little yellow flowers, and this is a big problem when people growing vegetables and they don't plant bright gaudy flowers in a vegetable garden. The bees kind of just buzz around, they don't catch that out of their eye, and they buzz past it, and then you have a lack of pollination. We talked about this being a monoecious plant back in the botany module. You do remember monoecious, correct? Monoecious, mono, one, house,ecious, monoecious, so it has separate, what does it have again? Separate male and female flowers. And only the girl flowers are going to get pregnant and produce cucumbers in this case, or if it were a squash or patty pan, whatever it is. So the bees have to pollinate it. This is kind of clumsy in my opinion, but putting in a short-term crop like radishes, which crop in about 28 to 35 days, somewhere in that time frame, for mixing that in with carrots, which will take about 3-ish months to before harvest. Of course, you can pick carrots when they're the size of your index finger if you wish. But the point is, one crop is harvested and then the other one fills in between. I find that being a little klutzy, I end up pulling up my carrots in the process of harvesting radishes. So your mileage might vary on that. Other ways to do it, some people do this with corn, which is a warm season vegetable, and they will use lettuce underneath, which will be shaded a bit by the corn to extend the season of lettuce a little bit past its normal season of end of October till about middle of March or so, when it gets kind of hot around here and lettuces will tend to bolt or get bitter. But being shaded, you get a couple more weeks or so of production out of this kind of a cropping. It's doable. Succession planting, great idea with corn. You can see some is tasseled out on the left-hand side of the picture, and then the other ones that are just about 2 feet shorter were probably planted 2 or 3 weeks later, maybe a little longer, maybe a little less. It's a little hard to give you an exact planting cycle, but the idea is you'll be eating that corn pretty soon on the tasseled one, and then when it's finished, you'll have another wave of fresh corn to eat. Just what you wanted, more corn to eat after you've been eating corn morning, noon, and night, huh? But again, this is a great way of doing it. There's a well-known corn grower up in Hernando County, Fraser Farm, you may have heard of it. And a few years ago, with the hurricane season of 2004, we had three hurricanes blowing in starting in August and ending in mid to late September was the last, and his fields were wet for quite a bit of time. Well, he had planted some in August, end of August, which is a normal planting time. That didn't do so well because it drowned. And then he planted again at the end of September, which is pushing it kind of late, and then he did it another time about mid-October, which is extremely late for Hernando County to put in corn. And luckily, that last one was the one that did the best because the fields were dry enough and winter frost held out longer than typical. So he did hedge his bet and he won that lottery that time, but that doesn't always happen. Crop arrangement, there are different ways to do it. A lot of people group them by family. It's really easy for crop rotation. Now you hear crop rotation a lot. Rotate your crops, rotate your crops. What does that really mean? You don't want to put the same crop in the same area year after year after year. Why is that? Think about this for a minute. Well, let's say you put tomatoes in and year out and year in and year out for 2 or 3 years in a row. What's going to happen? You're going to build up disease uh, problems in the soil because spores land and blow in, and the numbers just get bigger and bigger in that area. So your likelihood of disease or insect attacks on your tomatoes will go up when you put in the same crop over and over again. Now, a lot of people will crop rotate but not understand a lot of our vegetables are in the same family. For example, tomatoes. Let's say I put in tomatoes this fall, meaning end of August, early September, and then next spring, which will be late February, early March, I put in eggplant. Is that a good crop rotation? Well, some of you are going, those are different plants. Okay, that sounds great. Other of you are like, something doesn't seem right. It seems like a trick question. And we've learned that Jim always asks trick questions. Yes, well, I do. Anyhow, the point I'm trying to make is eggplant and tomatoes are in the same family, Solanaceae, the deadly nightshade family. So that would be a poor crop rotation. How about tomatoes and potatoes for the winter? Well, potatoes and tomatoes are in the same family. What about tomatoes followed by peppers? Again, same family. Tomatoes and tomatillo, same family, the nightshade family. So don't do that to yourself by putting in the same family. You want to rotate it really by family, not just the plant. Other ways to arrange a garden are by the planting and maturation dates. You'll find some beds you're going to harvest. If you put in a warm season fall crop, you'll be harvesting that maybe around Christmas time or before frost. And then you'll have an open area and you'll want to put something in there maybe for the winter, like a cold crop, cabbages and things like that. You might do it by size, so you don't shade things out, spacing. Or you may just have a bed with really long season or long-term plants like herbs that can be perennial in some cases. So here's a bed of some kind of cruciferous vegetable. Hard to say exactly which one, maybe collards, but it's some kind of cold crop or cruciferous vegetable. So next year I won't put anything that's in the cabbage family in there. I'll put in something like lettuce, which is a different family. Now, I won't dwell on this slide for very long, but I have divided it out by families. You have Alliaceae, the alliums, the onion families, onions, shallots, chives, garlic. A side note of garlic, you plant a clove of garlic and the size of your little fingertip, and you'll harvest a head about the size of your thumb. Doesn't do real well in Florida, although I've had some people have some luck with it. So you have the allium family. Apiaceae, the carrot family. Queen Anne's lace is a type of a wild carrot. Don't eat it. Chervil, a herb that is underutilized and most people have never heard of it. Cilantro, fennel, parsley. Parsnips are all in the carrot family. Then we have Asteraceae, the daisy family. Endive, escarole, lettuces, sunflowers. So there is an unusual family of veggies to rotate. Chenopodiaceae, the beet family. Beets, chives, and spinach are all related. Brassicaceae is a huge grouping of vegetables, very common. The broccoli, the Brussels sprouts, cabbage, collard, cauliflower, kale, kohlrabi. Most of you probably don't know kohlrabi, but me growing in the upper Midwest and of German extraction, we grew that quite commonly. Mustard, mustard greens, radish, rutabaga, certainly not my favorite, but hey, everyone likes something different, and turnips are all in the cabbage family. Cucurbitaceae, the cucumbers, chayote, or mirliton you might know it as. Alligator pear, I think, is another name for chayote. The various melons, muskmelon, watermelon, all those things that I find disgusting. Squashes, whether it's patty pan, crookneck, acorn, winter, summer squashes, they're all in the same family. Solanaceae, the deadly nightshade family, eggplant, potato, tomatoes, and peppers. Fabaceae, the bean and pea, the legumes. So these are the ones that fix their nitrogen in their root system with those nodules. We talked about that in the botany section. The mint family, be careful of planting mint in the garden. They become noxious weeds. You're warned. But not everything in the mint family is a noxious weed, but mints, peppermint, spearmint, those perennial ones are. Basil, rosemary, sage, marjoram, and thyme are in the mint family. The only thing we grow commonly as homeowners in the grass family would be corn. I do warn against growing corn. You will have all sorts of various caterpillars wanting to feed on it, and raccoons who will want your harvest as well. You're warned. Let's talk about some companion myths. There are various books. Some are been around for a couple hundred years. Those almanac type books have various myths that get perpetuated. Some of them have some truth to them, but the whole truth is not the same as what they write about. Compatibility. This plant is more compatible with that plant. There's really not much written on that as to compatibility. Now, there are certain plants out there that put out alleliopathic chemicals to keep other plants from growing around them, like eastern red cedar does that. So, but vegetables, not really there. Pest repellency. Okay, the idea is if you plant an onion here and a garlic there, you won't get caterpillars on this over there. That probably isn't going to do anything. Now, sometimes if you have big blocks of some of these plants that put out some volatile compounds, chemicals, like onions and garlic and all, it might kind of confuse the insects to where to feed, or might work slightly as a repellent, but don't put your eggs all into that one basket. Nitrogen fixation. The truth is, yes, legumes do fix nitrogen out of the atmosphere in the nodules by a bacterial association, a symbiotic relationship with this bacteria in the soil. Bacterium, I should say, to be correct. The thing is, that nitrogen that is fixed by the bacterium is used by the mostly used up by the crop during that cropping season. So by the time you recrop that area, most of that nitrogen that was fixed is either volatilized or has started to leach out of the system. You will still need to add nitrogen fertilizer of some sort, even if you're organic gardening. Nematode control. There are some truths with certain plants putting out organic chemicals that work to control nematodes, but it has to be done correctly. I'll talk about that a little later in the modules. So here's a idea of companion planting. There's an allium of some sort. I'm not quite sure what onion thing that is. And the idea is that those onions and those petunias are maybe warding off white flies that would be feeding on the squash in the left-hand side of the picture with the lobed leaves. It probably isn't doing anything, but again, you have some allium of some sort or onion thing to harvest, and gosh, you have some bright, gaudy flowers planted by the vegetable garden. That's going to help attract those pollinators. So while it's not bad, it may not be doing exactly what you want, but you are getting some pollinators for sure. Again, here are some legumes, some kind of bean growing, and good grief, they have flowers too that need pollinating to set fruit. Beans are a fruit, remember that, it's a legume. And if somebody plants some big gaudy flowers nearby, looks like maybe zinnias. Way to go, people. Okay, here is one of those companion plants or nematode warding off ideas that doesn't work like most people think it will. Here, somebody has planted a few marigolds with the idea, probably the idea, to keep nematodes from going after that tomato plant, which is a plant on the lower left hand side of the photograph. That marigold is probably going to do nothing to help reduce nematode issues that can or might occur for those um, tomatoes. But what are those marigolds really doing? Right, they're serving as an attraction for our pollinators to pollinate our tomatoes. Planting by moon phases. There's absolutely no scientific evidence to support planting by the moon waxing or waning or Mercury going into retrograde. Isn't Mercury always going into retrograde when you read those things? I don't know. Mercury has issues apparently. The point I'm trying to make is some people will only plant crops that grow up as the moon is getting more full, and people plant crops that only go down like roots, like carrot, when the moon is going, not full anymore. And it's like, it doesn't really matter what phase the moon is in. But timing does matter as to when you plant in this area for getting a crop in our very unusual cropping seasons we have in Florida. As I mentioned, timing is everything. Warm season vegetables are planted into the ground usually in mid to late February into early March, somewhere in there. Now somebody out there is going, mid February. That's our warmer side of the county, our 9B-ish area, which is closer to the west coast near the Gulf, the part, kind of Highway 52 south and over toward the coast. Zephyr Hills is kind of more the northern half. So some of those folks can get a little jump start by about 2 weeks versus most of the rest of the county. But most of us have to start getting our warm season vegetables into the ground about the end of February, early part of March, so that they will grow, set fruit, and produce before the heavy rains, which usually return sometime in June. That is a very tight timing window. Also, you're probably going, there's a potential for frost during that time still. Jim mentioned that in cold protection that, gee, we can have frost to mid-March. We can have frost beyond mid-March, but it gets pretty unusual to have that. But again, these plants, if they're out there, they'd be relatively small, easy to cover, fairly easy to protect. If you're going to start your own transplants of warm season vegetables, they'll need to be started about the first of the year. So while you're singing Old Lang Syne, you're planting your tomatoes and peppers and eggplants in little cups or whatever you do, and you're going to have to grow it in a protected location. I mentioned that the warm season vegetables may need cold protection. The other time we plant warm season vegetables, and I'll talk about which are warm and cool season vegetables in a moment, is late August into very early September. Yes, that's during the height of the hurricane season. So some of those plants may drown if we do get heavy rains from a tropical system. Those transplants need to be started sometime around the 4th of July or thereabouts, mid July at about the latest to be transplants. Why do we want to put these warm season vegetables in by the end of August? That gives us September, October, November, December. That's 4 months of probably frost-free weather. When was the first frost likely? Sometime around December 10th. There's a 50-50 probable time. Now, I've seen it as early as we had one year in late October in Hernando County. Very, very unusual. But somewhere between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we almost always will get a frost in the cooler half of the county. The warmer half of the county usually dodges that early frost and doesn't get it till closer to Christmas into the new year. Yes, they have an advantage over the cooler half of the county, that's for sure. So the warm season vegetables, all the various beans, pole beans, green beans, navy beans, or whatever. Cantaloupe, corn, cucumbers, all the cucurbits, eggplant, okra, southern peas. Southern peas are not the English sweet peas. Those are the southern peas are the starchy peas, the black-eyed peas, the Crowder peas, things like that. Peppers or chilies, sweet or hot, doesn't matter. Peppers. Sweet potato, pumpkins, squashes, tomatoes, and melons. Now, of these pictures here, there's only a few that will go through the summer months. If you want any kind of summer vegetables, if you plant eggplant at about the end of February, early March, it'll keep on trucking till about mid-August or thereabout, and then it goes and gives up the ghost. It's had enough heat and humidity and rain, and it dies out. But you can get a very long production out of eggplant, but don't be surprised when it conks out sometime in August. Now, okra will keep on trucking throughout the summer. And I didn't put what family that was in the slides. What's that? It's a hibiscus family. Huh, didn't know you're eating a hibiscus seed pod, did you? So it is quite ornamental too. The flowers are bright yellow, big yellow hibiscus flowers, followed by a pod, some which are red. Okra will survive our heat, humidity, rains, everything you throw at it, and keep on going all summer long and harvestable. Southern peas are also one of the things that will go through our summer months quite happily. And finally, the other thing that you can grow through the summer months are the peppers, the hot peppers, chili peppers, bell peppers, etc. Also, sweet potatoes love our summer heat. You've also noticed people growing the ornamental sweet potato vines as a ground cover. Yes, those sweet potato vine tubers can be eaten. They're usually less sweet and kind of stringy. They're rejected for that reason for eating, but the horticulturists looked over at the ag people's compost pile and saw these pretty vines growing in there and said, hey, we want those. Hey, the strange things we do in dumpster diving days, huh? So we have one cool season per year. Think when it starts cooling down around here, usually late October, although the last few years it hasn't cooled down in November much, has it? But again, the days are shorter, the nighttime temperatures are definitely a lot cooler than summer or any other time of the year. Those transplants need to be started sometime in early September. Uh, if they're transplants, they're going to be planted into the vegetable garden during Halloween time, end of October, early November. That's your timing window. Now, you may be thinking right now, gee, I already have fall stuff in, and now I got to start planting this cool season stuff. Well, you may have to keep some areas kind of fallow if you're going to put a lot of cool season vegetables in. And there are a lot of vegetables that much prefer the cool season over the warm. Beets, broccoli, cabbages, everything in the cabbage group. Carrot, cauliflower. Celery is very hard to grow, boys and girls. I highly recommend against it as a home gardener. But prove me wrong if you wish. Collards, if you can't grow collards at all, then you need to give up veggie gardening. It's about as easy as any vegetable will get, and they're very good when cooked right. Endive, if you wish, kohlrabi, lettuces, mustard greens, onions, parsley, English peas, they like it cool, potatoes, radish, spinach, and turnips. So a lot of cool season vegetables are out there. They're planted about Halloween. Saving seed fresh versus saved seed. Well, let's do a little review of some of the thing. Let's look at the guy who has a big old zucchini that he missed, and let's say those seeds inside are mature and could be harvested and saved for next season. Now, if he saves that from a hybrid zucchini, what will he get? Yes, he's going to get a zucchini. Will he get the exact same zucchini type that he planted the season before? No, he won't, because some other flower pollinated it, or it didn't go back to the original parents for the pollination to keep the cultivar going. So do not save seeds out of hybrid vegetables. Heirloom, a little different story. But even then, that can sometimes be a little on some of them, especially if you have a bunch of heirloom squashes all growing at once. They can cross pollinate each other. Yeah, a little slutty there, huh? Kind of like oaks. Saving seed. Can you save a packet of seeds, and it says save for 2016, and you open it up and it's 4 years later? Well, what do? Throw it out? A lot of seeds will last for a long period of time. The only thing is germination starts going down after time. So seeds can be saved from the packet for many years and still be pretty good to go and grow. Some seeds will last a long time: cucumbers, turnips, watermelons, eggplant. Some are on the medium, like 3 to 4 or 5 years: beans, carrots, tomatoes, etc. Short-lived are onion, corn, okra, parsnips, according to the book. So I bought corn years ago as a kid, doing this in the upper Midwest, and I have seeds. I bought so many I had them for at least half a dozen years or more. What I do is I keep them cool and dry. I put them in a seed packet in a zip bag and throw it in the back of the fridge. I do not put my seeds in the freezer. I put them in the refrigerator, cool and dry. So here's kind of a good rule of thumb. Most seeds are going to last 3 years for sure. Many will last even 15 or more. You want it to be cool, 35 to 50. Well, our refrigerators are right at about 35. Relatively dry, 50 to 70% relative humidity. The zip bag does a great job. You can put it in mason jars as well. They just take up more room. You're not going to be able to measure the seed moisture. Again, the refrigerator is the best place. The freezer, I don't recommend. I think it just is too cold and can damage certain seeds. Some people put an absorbent material into the jar or zip bag to reduce the relative humidity. You can use one of those little packet of silica gels if you like, but I find just in a zip bag by itself to be just fine. Now, if you have seeds that are getting a little old and wondering, gee, are they any good? You can do what is called the rolled paper towel test. You unroll a couple sheets of paper towel, you wet it up, and then you put out a known number of seeds. I like to use 10, and I'll explain that in a second. So I put out 10 sieves in kind of a row or scatter about on the towel. Then I roll the towel up and I put it into a plastic bag to keep it moist, and I put it in a nice warm location, not hot but warm, and I wait several days and I check. And if when I unfurl the towel, I can see how many start to germinate. And if I have 10 seeds and 9 of them have germinated, I know I have 90% germination rate. See? Easy math. If I unroll the towel and I only see one has germinated, it may be a little too soon and I give it a couple more days. After a week or two, I only have one germinate. Still, from there, I only have 10% germination. Does that mean I can't use the seed? No, it just means I'm going to have to put out a lot more to get a crop. But sometimes I only need a handful of plants, like tomatoes or something. So even at low germination, you can still use them. It just you need to seed more. But you may look at your packet and say, I only have 10 seeds and I want, 5 tomato plants. Well, it's time to probably buy a new packet, huh? Transplantability, I won't go into a lot of details. Some of these I wouldn't transplant at all. Beets, for example, I wouldn't. But cabbages, eggplant, and tomatoes definitely are transplants to get into the ground. Sweet potato, you can plant the potato and it'll grow, but you can also do it from cuttings if you wish. Um, I can't imagine anyone crazy enough to transplant a carrot. But some grad student must have had to do it for a research project for his thesis, I guess. Celery definitely would be one I'd transplant, but I wouldn't grow it. It's a very difficult vegetable to grow. Kohlrabi I've done direct seed and I've transplanted it. Onions I prefer sets, but you can get the little seedlings sometimes in the grocery store or feed store or garden center. Same with mustard or spinach, either or direct seed or transplant can be done. Containerize, you're not going to transplant corn or the cucumber family members very easily, or radishes or turnips or any of that. Just really hard. Second here. Notice how this gentleman or lady is seeding these beans here, two per, every couple inches. Now, that may be because his seed is getting old and he knows that his germination is roughly 50%. Now, if I had fresh seed, I would probably do something like 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, knowing that the germination rate of new seeds purchased for the current year are going to have a really high germination rate. So most people wait too long to thin seedlings. I do it when it's sooner, right after the true leaves start to emerge. Remember, the first leaf, if it's a monocot, is a seed leaf. If it's a dicot, the first leaves, would be two of them, are the seed leaves and don't look like the parent plant at all. It's the second leaf or set of leaves in a dicot that look or resemble what it is. You can harvest some of those little seedlings, those microgreen fad that's going on currently in the country and probably in Europe as well. Yeah, those little lettuces and things like that, you can eat them. You could probably transplant them if you did it very carefully if you wish into some other area that you just didn't get good germination. Leave the best plants when thinning, even if the spacing isn't perfect. And when I thin, I prefer not to disturb the roots because I usually do not save these for transplants. I just want to get rid of the weaker of the herd, so to speak. So here are some dicot plants, and you can see the first two leaves are kind of oval and don't really look like a whole lot of much. But you can see that the second set of leaves have a few more ruffles and indentations, a little more characteristics of whatever bean that's going to be. So some of them are planted too closely together. Look at the right hand side of the photograph near where appears to be a piece of string or something or straw. Notice there's about 3 plants there. Now, when I was younger, I used to just pull them up and like I was weeding. And what would happen is the one I wanted to keep, the more stocky, more robust one, got pulled up in the process of removing the other 2 and 3 around it. So I was watching a garden program called the Victory Garden as a kid, and the presenter had a wonderful little scissors that he used. And I saw that, and he told the viewer why he used a pair of scissors. He'd just nip it off so he wouldn't disturb the root system. I thought, well, that's a great idea. So I had scissors, kid scissors, with a rounded tip, which, we all had that back then. And then Mom had some kitchen scissors that were big and long and too clunky to get into those small areas. But I remembered in her drawer in her bed in her bathroom, she had that makeup drawer that ladies typically have, and she had brushes and combs and mirror and doodads and whatnots and colored lotion and eyeshadow and this and that. But she had this nice little set of scissors in there. I don't know what they were for, but there was a nice little set of scissors and nice and sharp, and it fit just right in where I needed to be. And there I took it to the garden. I started nipping what I didn't want. For whatever reason, Mom took exception to me using that very fancy scissors. I guess it was German in its make, and it very, very expensive, and that soil was probably dulling the blades. So uh, as a Christmas gift, I got a special scissors from one of these high-end catalogs that was even better than Mom's little makeup drawer scissors. So, guys, if you need a new pair of scissors like that, that's how you might be able to get it. Starting with transplants, I like to start a lot of plants as a transplant and put them in. First of all, it's instant gratification. That's kind of a guy thing. But it also gives an early start and you can avoid bad weather. If it gets cold, you bring your transplants inside or to a more protected location. You get to pick the best of the plants, and even in your transplants, you'll see there's a few that just are kind of and you go and you weed it out. Again, that instant gratification, that instant success. You can usually germinate it under more ideal conditions. Some of you may have a little greenhouse, or you may use a shop light to artificially light them on a workbench in the garage, or some of you may have a heat map to keep the soil warm, especially in the winter months when we're growing warm season crops from transplants. Sometimes that's the only way to get the plants. A good example are sweet potatoes, strawberries. You don't plant strawberry seeds, tomato and eggplant, and so on and so forth. Let me just use strawberry as a side note. A lot of people know we grow strawberries in Florida. And that's true. We grow a lot down in the Plant City area, just a few miles away from us here. Now we grow, those are strawberries grown for Florida conditions. We plant those usually around the end of September or so for production. Homeowner, I would go a little later in October or November. But those strawberries were developed for our unique climate. We plant them in the fall and we harvest them in the winter into the early spring. Now, a lot of people have a hard time finding strawberry plants at their local box store or even good garden centers. They're just not widely available. So they go www and buy strawberries on the internet because it's easy to find that, and have Amazon Prime ship it to you or whoever you go through, and you get a box of strawberries from the north. Okay, and you plant those down here at the time that Jim said this is the time you plant them. By gosh, I got the timing right. He said timing is everything. And you're growing those for up north, which when do they come out of winter dormancy and flower? Well, they come out of their winter dormancy in my home state around May, maybe a little sooner if it's warm, and they're starting to flower and fruit in the end of May into June, into maybe even into July if it's not too hot. So, what are the day lengths up north like in June and July? About 16, 17 hours of day length. Okay, strawberries are typically a long day plant. But we're growing strawberries in the winter and getting fruit production when the days are in December, January, February, less than 12 hours or very short. How is that possible? We have bred for short day blooming strawberry plants for the deep south or for Florida conditions. So, if you plant those long day plants down here and try to grow them in the winter to get fruit production, by the time the day length is long enough, they're burning up in the summertime or springtime heat. So you've got to pick your strawberry cultivars very, very carefully for Florida conditions. Yes, humans do a lot of manipulation of plants, don't we? If you're going to transplant, it's better to transplant sooner rather than later. It was something that took me a long time to learn. I like to wait till I had a whole bunch of leaves coming out of those seedlings before I'd like to move them. But in the upper picture, you can see a person with like a skewer trying to dig out that dicot plant. I can see the first two leaves are the seed leaves, and the ones that are coming up next are the true leaves. That is the time to transplant your plants. What you want to do is you don't want to pick it up by the stem, which is easily crushed, but you want to get underneath it with a skewer of some sort or a knife. As a child, I went upstairs because I used to do this in the basement under grow lights, shop lights actually, just regular old fluorescent shop lights. So I needed something to dig to get underneath, and I looked around, and Mom had this amazing little paring knife that was nice and sharp and fit my hand just perfectly and got right into the trays where I needed them to go. For some reason, my mom took exception to me using her cutlery, her nice knives in the basement in my endeavors to be a horticulturist. So she went out to the thrift shop and got me a thrift shop paring knife. So that's how you get a new knife sometimes out of the deal. Yes, you can reuse containers. I used to grow things in containers that looked like this. I would bring home my milk cartons every day after I tried to rinse them out halfway at school, and Mom would carefully wash them and pull them apart, and I would use those as a container to grow transplants in. I poked some holes at the bottom with a pencil or whatever I used, and used those. Now those paper ones, after they're washed by Mom, were pretty clean, so I didn't disinfect them with the bleach and water solution. I just used them right away. And after the one-time use from those juice containers and milk cartons, they would get tossed away. But I also used a mix of those and various plastic flower pots from past years. So here I was one winter working on this project of cleaning the flower pots, and I was humped over the laundry sink in the laundry room, and here I had it full of water, hot water, and some soap suds in there, and I had a scrub brush, and I'm scrubbing away and rinsing and this, and then trying to stack these up on newspaper or old towels on the washer and dryer, and good grief, even as a young kid, my back was starting to get unhappy being all humped over for hours. And after I scrubbed them with the dirt, then they had to go back into the laundry tub after I cleaned that out. And then I had to soak them in that 10% bleach and water solution for at least 30 minutes to disinfect them, to kill any microorganisms, any kind of bacterial or fungal spores. So that was a lot of rigmarole and a lot of work and stacking them up and drying, and what a mess. Well, the next year rolled around and Mom and Dad left me home alone, I guess. And I started doing the annual scrubbing of the pots, and I'm standing over the sink and humped over and scrubbing, and I just kind of looked at the washing machine. And I kind of went, well, that can wash clothes. And I had all these pots. Well, that's not going to work. But I went, these would probably fit in the dishwasher pretty well, I think. And sure enough, I loaded the dishwasher up with all my dirty flower pots, and I put in some detergent, and I figured the heat of the hot water and the detergent and the drying cycle uh, would probably work great to disinfect my flower pots. So I pushed the button for the long cycle of pots and pans. Well, Mom and Dad came home and said, "Why is my dishwasher running?" I said, "Oh, I'm washing my flower pots." Anyone want to guess how many times I did that? Yep, you're right, once. But stranger things have been known to make it into dishwashers in people's homes. So please don't laugh at me for doing something like washing flower pots. I mean, certainly that is stranger than flower pots going into the dishwasher. That will end part 2 of vegetable gardening. Join me in part 3.